Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better, so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. Ever thought about how strong community bonds and physical activity can transform mental health? Today, I'm joined by Tim Hewson, founder of Mongrels Men Health and Wellbeing. After 27 years as a banking and finance professional, Tim shifted his career to becoming a mental health advocate, inspired by his own experiences with anxiety and depression. Mongrels Men is a charity dedicated to improving men's mental health through social connections and physical activity. Over the past 3 years, it has expanded from a local initiative to 12 locations across New South Wales and Queensland, with plans to grow nationwide and impact 1 million men annually. We also discuss the importance of early education, reducing stigma, and creating supportive spaces where men can connect and thrive. Well, hi Tim, it's been a while since we've last caught up.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
Good, thanks. I've known you from the financial services industry, and you did have an impressive career. But you've really taken a bit of a right turn where you are now. Can you just share why, from your experiences in the corporate world, has helped you shape this approach in improving men's mental health and wellbeing, which is such an important topic and a topic close to my own heart with the financial wellbeing side?
Yeah, sure. A right-hand turn. I don't know whether it's a 180 or more of a sideways step, but it's certainly a very different pathway for me. And I think, if anything, 27 years in the corporate world, in particular in banking and finance, has taught me a lot. I was lucky enough in that time frame to be able to have a number of roles, and that's given me a very broad and deep skill set. And if I think about how and where I'm applying that now, whether it's starting up a men's mental health charity from scratch, whether it's starting up my own business, Betterment Consulting in the kind of mental health and wellbeing, or just trying to have an impact in this space. I've been able to employ all of the skills that I've garnished over that time frame. If I think about leadership, that was necessary for me to put in place a board. I've got to manage 15 champions and volunteers across the charity. Sales is a big part of fundraising,
Yes.
and then strategy, product management, having to plan out who we are and what we do, how we want to have impact, purpose, and then the fun stuff, compliance and governance. That's been, as you well know, a huge focus for the industry in the last 10 to 15 years. Within the charity sector, it's a heavily governed sector, so it's been a great kind of platform for me to be able to build a charity from.
And I think, given your background, I think that's one of the reasons, unfortunately, I've seen charities just fall over, and it's really, they've got a great idea, they've got a passion for whatever particular cause or charity that they're wanting to do. It's just the structure, the bones behind that, needing the governance, as you said, the compliance, even as you said, building a sales team, to looking for that. It's that you've got that. So it's actually, from a charity point of view, that's a great start.
Yeah, it is, but I'll be honest in saying, we've only just clicked over 3 years, and in that very, very short time frame, we've gone from having to roll our sleeves up, get our hands dirty, and for all of our volunteers, directors and champions to kind of dig in and put in some hard work, to learning some really, really valuable lessons in that very short time frame. The world has moved on. Mental health is now a much more common conversation. It's happening more and more. It still needs to happen more often, but it's happening more and more. Awareness is better. Negative stigma has been reduced. More money's going into this area, but of course the challenges continue to grow. So we've had to adapt our thinking and adapt our model from what we've learned over the last 3 years to where we actually want to go and where we need to go.
And COVID had a big part to play with that. People, the mental health side of it, the isolation, and just even the anxiety of seeing something or being affected by something we just never knew about. And how was that going to affect our lives forever, or was this a temporary thing? So I just remember people coming out of that, and people absolutely said, maybe before mental health was okay, we need to talk about it, but it's sort of just sitting there on the side there. But after COVID, geez, it brought it front and center, didn't it?
It really did. And I think this is one of the positive outcomes of COVID and isolation, and us having to rethink who we are, what we do, how we go about it, and kind of look inwardly to kind of build up, what is otherwise termed as resilience. And I know this is something kind of close to your heart as well. But, the lack of social connection, the lack of community, the lack of being able to have face-to-face conversations with people. The few things that you were able to do, depending upon where you are, was get outside and do a little bit of exercise, even if it was just for an hour a day. And then there was limits around who you could socialise and mix and exercise with. So it kind of made people rethink what's important to me. How do I keep myself mentally and physically fit and strong and build the resilience? Because nobody really knew how long we were going to be in this situation for.
And I could see, even differences from my friends or family in Queensland who had a lot more freedom, and same with West Australia, to what we were we were in the middle in New South Wales. But when we saw, say, Victoria, and went into, they say, the third or fourth serious lockdown, you're just talking to them on the phone, you could just hear it in their voices. That was significant. That very last big lockdown that they had for a couple of months, there were a lot of people struggling.
Yeah, and that was the really interesting thing for me, because you actually had to find a way to meaningfully connect with people via two dimensions, or over a phone, or via text messages, and it was a change in the way that I had behaved, because being sales and product and strategy, I was out kind of talking to people all the time, whether it was for work, the work I was doing in the charity, or just as part of sporting groups. It was a big change, and it had to change. It forced me to change the way I connect and communicate with other people. It had to become more meaningful. It had to have an impact. And at the same time, I needed to get something out of that human connection as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how you started Mongrels Men, and you actually said about the sporting connection. And I really enjoy that story, so we will go into that. But just before that, it must have really, and as well as I do, we saw people in high pressure careers just really struggle with balancing well-being and mental health. From your own experience and being more corporate, because I was more small business, you must have really saw that on a daily occurrence, this struggle with mental health challenges in the workplace.
Yeah, not just in the workplace, but outside the workplace as well. At the time I was managing a national sales team, so I had people kind of all over the country. The only thing that we had was digital means for being able to maintain contact with one another. We had at the time weekly sales meetings, and what I found was that on top of the work that needed to be done, and that mounting pressure and the anxiety and not being able to get outside, and the lack of human connection, and the significant shift in the way that we all had to behave in a professional and work environment, and as humans, we had to shift our thinking around how we engaged as a team. So every second sales meeting was wiped, and it just became a social, and the socials turned into fancy dress and games, and just ways for us to be able to connect as humans, not just people that work together. And it's something that we kept all the way through COVID and beyond COVID. Every second sales meeting was no longer a sales meeting; it was our social, and the rule was simple: we don't talk about work. We talk about the stuff that's important to us and ourselves. So it was an important pivot point for us, even within the organisation. Businesses did do generally pretty well. Health and wellbeing became a much more significant focus, but it's not the same when you can't get out, move, and connect with real people in a real way. And
so that leads me to your charity, Mongrels Men, and I know it had a sporting background, and we both share a love of football. Yep. People call it soccer, but it's really called football. So tell me how Mongrels Men came about.
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of sporting aspects to this, because I suppose I started organising events for guys to get together back in 2008. It was a golf weekend, and that kind of just grew over time in the background and was a once a year event. And I didn't really appreciate how important it was for these guys to be able to get together and have a weekend away and time for themselves. But it was, a couple of dads standing on the sideline one weekend after watching their kids and wives and everybody else running up and down, having a great time with big smiles on their faces, realising that we'd been standing on the sidelines of life and had missed out. So we set up the team. One of the great benefits of being the team manager in terms of, not just washing the bibs and bringing the oranges and herding blokes, middle-aged blokes like cats every week, was organising the end of season event. And we were out celebrating a middle-aged football season victory in 2018. And one of the guys came up and he said, "Listen, Timbo, thanks for organising, mate. I really appreciate it." And I kind of made a joke about being the oldest player in the team and how being the team manager was the only way I could secure some time on the field. And he said, "No, seriously, because if you didn't organise for me to turn up to training, to turn up to the games and have the support of these blokes, I just wouldn't be here." And, those words kind of rattled around in my brain all night, and they hit me like a sledgehammer the next morning, that we'd done a great job as teammates, stepping over that white line onto the field, behaving as a team, supporting one another, being there for each other, but we stepped back off the field and over that white line, and we completely missed it. Here is a guy that had been standing in front of me and for the last 6 months had been thinking about taking his own life, and I'd missed it. The entire team had missed it, and we needed to do a much better job of digging deep, scratching below the surface, having more meaningful conversations, and being there to support one another. And that in combination with, seeing some of the increasing challenges that friends and family were going through, looking at the mental health and suicide statistics in particular impacting men, made me think that I kind of needed to do something more than just organise a blokes football match and, an annual golf event. I needed to do something more than what I was doing.
No, and I think that's so important. And a lot of that mirrored the way I stayed in football for so long, right? Basically up until 60, because the same thing, our children all went to the same primary school. We were sitting on the sidelines and saying, well, what do we do in the afternoon? Why don't we form our own team? And it went from 15 dads to 100 dads from the same primary. And it was a great way. Most people say that when you go to these primary school events or even high school events, because we all moved on, that it was the fathers who just sat around not knowing. But in our situation, we all knew each other because we played footy on the weekend. But you've taken it that one step further, and it's so important that you created the community, but you're now creating the conversations. And It's one of the things that I really think I'd love to know more about how you took that one extra step, because I'm even just thinking of my own soccer community, and we still have our end of year events, and we start a bit of that conversation, but obviously you've taken it to that next level, and I think that's really important. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things. After I had that conversation with that guy, it became apparent that we needed to change. So the skipper, the captain, and I got together and we said, listen, we need to change the way this team behaves because we've missed this and we don't want it to happen. We can't afford to have it happen again. Outside of that football framework too, I'd started to just kind of test and learn a few things in 2019. I went, all right, what happens if I put a Facebook post out about a sunrise yoga or some Pilates or a beach walk and talk or an endurance run or a fundraising event? And all of a sudden, guys kind of kept coming from everywhere. I'd also started to run up and down the beach with a mate. Trent identified that, getting out, regular exercise, running and walking shoulder to shoulder allowed me to kind of gain the confidence to open up and, if I can, share my shit a little bit with this guy so that we were able to have a more meaningful conversation and test and learn more meaningful conversations, the involvement of exercise, movement, this idea that sports is not just a great community initiative, but a way to bring people together, gave blokes a reason to turn up, a reason to be there, an excuse. And for us, it was almost like a disguise in some ways. But it was creating just a space, and I call it a brave space, for guys to be able to get together, build trust, rapport, confidence, and then start opening up to connect. And so there was kind of a few moving parts between 2018 and 19 until in 2021. I went, I think we need to scale this. Like we're having an impact. We're seeing the impact it's having. The families and friends are telling us that it's having an impact. The men are better. they're healthier, they were stronger as a pack, when they were coming together, this idea of the mongrel pack. And so that's what I did. I didn't want to make money out of this. I wanted this to be something that people got the benefit of. And so the charity was the right way to go.
And you've even made movement one of your key pillars of Mongrels Men. And so you've obviously saw how the football and the other activities that you're doing just helps people's mental health. And have you actually just even in that, apart from getting fitter, do you actually see how, stories of where the people you've played soccer with, or as you said, the running groups or these others, or even Pilates group, how just having been together in a group with physical activity has made such a big difference?
Yeah, a huge difference. And we know, the research tells us that 50% of blokes don't get enough exercise. So, community, team-based, social, competitive, whatever it is an excuse to bring guys together. One of the other things that was said to me as part of the soccer team was it's the only 90 minutes that I have to myself during the week where I'm not, running a business. I'm not a father. I'm not a husband. I don't have to, worry about employees. I can just be me. I can just think about me. And so this idea of creating a space just for a bloke to be a bloke and men to be men, but use physical activity and movement as a way to also encourage, help, support, but also drive much better kind of physical health and wellbeing made sense. There were some great benefits to physical activity and mental health. We all know that there's an immediate connection between the two. We also know that low and no movement can have an impact, increase stress, increase anxiety, results in higher rates of depression. But regular exercise, research tells us, 1 to 3 times per week at a reasonable level can improve our mental health and wellbeing by about 40%.
Yeah,
and
that's significant. And please keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say it was a great benefit, not just physically, but we're getting together, we're running and playing and shoulder to shoulder, and I think that non-threatening way of allowing blokes to be able to turn up and have a conversation in a non-threatening way allows them to feel more comfortable to open up and share some of their challenges, because it wasn't that long ago that if 2 blokes were staring at each other across a table, it meant you were going to war. Who would have thought chasing a ball around a football field could have saved lives?
And I think that's such an important point, because really there was a stigma. There is absolutely a stigma. Even still, there's a stigma around men seeking help. Even talking to, even speaking to a mate, or even the "Are you okay" day. For adult men, anyone's over 40, I think 20 and 30-year-olds are getting better at it, even though a lot of work still needs to be done there. But for our age group, there is still a real stigma. And I do remember someone pulling me up at a dinner table, a good mate, and I was saying, I was raised, you just keep it in. My parents said, don't talk about it. That was it. That was the way I was raised. And I still, to this day, I do handle stress pretty well and have my own ways of handling stress, but I don't talk about it. And This guy just pulled me up after we'd all finished dinner and just pulled me aside. He said, I would be really offended if you didn't feel comfortable enough to come to me and speak if you had any problems. And it just really struck me, because I've never had a guy tell me that before, and just say, because you just don't normally talk about it. And so that stigma, especially through sport, I can absolutely clear examples in my own sporting team where things like that have popped up. Someone's got an illness, they've got cancer, and the conversation does change.
Yeah, and so you've touched on a couple of really important things. One is negative stigma. The other is kind of masculinity and male role modeling and what we've been taught. The other is this concept of treating your mental health like your physical health. So if you're having those conversations in the soccer team or the football team around your physical health, why aren't we having the conversations around our mental health the same way? And we need to start thinking about our mental health the same way we think about our physical health. The same way you'd get a personal trainer or a coach for your physical health, you can get personal trainers and counsellors, psychologists and psychiatrists to help with your mental health, or just talking to somebody can help. This idea of masculinity and role modelling, if I think about my experience as a young boy, I used to watch my father get ready for work, put on a suit, press shirt, polish shoes, and then he'd pop me up on the stool next to him and he'd teach me how to tie a tie knot in the mirror. And I didn't really realise, but at the time, that was how I was modelling manhood. I still played with Lego and Matchbox cars and Meccano, but I was obsessed with mastering the art of tying the perfect tie knot. You roll that forward into my teenage years and I've got your typical worries and anxieties, but I was also highly paranoid, and those paranoid thoughts meant that I couldn't leave the house until my shoes were freshly polished, my socks were pulled up, the lines of my socks were straight down my shins, my pants were pressed, my belt buckle lined up with my buttons, and of course I had to have the perfect tie knot. And I was also obsessed as a teenager with my hair. So I couldn't leave the house until I'd done all of these things. Transition that into my 20s, and I'm now experiencing anxiety and having panic attacks every single day. And it was how I would start my day. I'd rush off into the men's bathroom, lock myself in the toilet stall and just hang on, to this whisker of hope while my kind of mind was racing, my heart was beating out of my chest. I felt nauseous, sick, dizzy, shaking. I had no idea what was happening. And untreated, I'm now in my 30s, but I've got a wife, 3 kids, and having done nothing about it, I ended up experiencing what I now know was depression. And if you were to ask my family what it looked like, it was Dad's a workaholic, he's grumpy and he's irritable all the time. And then it wasn't until my 40s that I finally woke up, having buried myself in 20 years of fear, shame and embarrassment, that I finally got some professional help. But it happened to coincide with when I was getting separated and going through divorce. But it was this man up approach, this not speaking up, this burying, myself in work, fear, shame, embarrassment, lack of education and knowledge because of the stigma. And so that idea for me of shifting from, man up to suck it up, to soldier up, to drink a glass of men, it needs to be about speaking up. So that point about male role modelling, I looked in the mirror and the guy I saw staring back at me was wearing a suit, he had a good job, he had wife, kids. It was everything that I thought I was meant to be. It was everything that I was taught, standing on that tall stool as a kid, tying my tie knot. That's what I saw. That's what I was taught to be. But, it took 20 years for me to figure out that approach just doesn't work.
That's very, very honest of you and very brave of you to talk about your own experiences like that, Tim. How, and I'm just relating it back to my own situation, to actually take that step to contact a professional to get help, that must have been a major step for you. It major barrier for you, I suppose, even.
Well, it was a barrier for 20 years. And, I didn't want to ask the question because I didn't want the answer. I didn't want to admit there was anything wrong, but I knew that there was something wrong. It was impacting my life and my marriage and relationships in a significant way. But at the same time, I was able to hold down a job and build a career and earn an income and provide for my family and do all of those things that we think that we're meant to be doing. That's what masculinity for such a long time, for generations, has been defined as. But to your point about bravery, so 2 things. The first is, I think it was one of the hardest things I would do. Certainly in my top 3 is reach out for help. But I made it that. It was actually one of the most beneficial things that I could have done ultimately. And secondly, overcoming that kind of negative stigma was, again, mostly around me. But to be fair, we're talking more than 20 years ago, and the world has changed a lot in that very that over that time frame, and even more so in the last 5 years, where mental health awareness is much better. The negative stigma is starting to subside, but it is still there. 25 years ago, there's no way I could have had that conversation with anybody.
Yeah, no, it is. You're absolutely right. And we'll talk about November and other mental health month. And, they're so prominent and so much work is being done in those areas. It's just great. I always have a problem with, as you said, you couldn't have done this 20, 25 years ago when you were younger. It's easier now. How do you find it's different for 20 and 30-year-olds now to people? It is easier for that, but they've also got just different, they've got gambling apps. They've got different issues that we never had to deal with. That's absolutely affecting people's mental health. And I know you're sort of looking, your age group of Mongrels Men is probably a bit older, but it obviously is something you've seen and would have a view on.
Yeah, and not only through my own life experience, but family, friends. I've got 3 teenagers. I think we're lucky that mental health education and awareness is happening at a much younger age. It's happening through our schools, and that's where it needs to happen, because if we actually want to really turn the dial on the suicide numbers and the mental health disorder and illness numbers, we actually have to think about not just control and reduction, but we have to go all the way down the pipeline as far down as we can for prevention. But that's that's a double-edged sword. Information education needs to be taught and delivered in the right way, so it's not alarmist, that we don't attach ourselves to things that become problematic, and we don't also build a level of resilience that we need to be able to adapt and evolve through life. So it is starting in schools, it's happening earlier, and it's a good thing. But I don't want it to result in us missing out on the parents and the older generations. So we need to work just as hard, because we know that mental health and suicide rates spike as you get older. It's, the leading cause of death for Australians between the ages of 15 to 44 is suicide, which, when you look at that, is kind of quite shocking as a statistic and a number. So information education's out there, the opportunity for conversations and the stigma is being reduced, but we still need to get better at some of these practical and fundamental ways of having more meaningful conversations, of knowing what to do and how to help and provide support, and then encourage professional help and support when it's needed. And
one of the things, just doing some research on the information you're kindly providing on your website, it really struck me in that you're saying about 1 in 3 men between 30 and 65 have no social connections, and I just thought that couldn't possibly be right. But one of the things you said earlier was, even in your own marriage, they didn't understand what the pressures that you were going through because you hid them. So, there is an isolation in that, even if you've got family and friends surrounding you. So I now get that. But what are some of the practical ways? Because you just mentioned there some of the practical ways you can help turn this, we can turn this statistic around.
Yeah, and there's a very clear impact on our physical and mental health around things like loneliness, those 1 in 3 having no social connections. And 1 in 3 Australians feel lonely. The World Health Organization has looked at loneliness as a major and global public health crisis. We have ministers already being appointed to governments across the globe that are specifically looking at tackling this, and can knock 15 years off your life and have the same impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we need to do something about it. What do? Well, through the charity, one of the things we do is get guys together and give them this brave space. But the brave space has to be earned in a way. Like, you've got to turn up, you've got to trust those around you, you've got to build rapport for you to be able to then share some of your challenges. Some guys come in and they share like that. Others, it takes some time. So we focus on making it easy. We make it simple. There's no admin, there's no joining, there's no fees, there's no paperwork. We even pay for the coffee to get the guys to stick around and encourage a conversation. We just take the hurdles away. And if you take the hurdles away, you take the excuses away. And if you take those away, then you create opportunity. And the opportunity then arises out of being inclusive and providing a range of opportunities for men to use exercise and movement, but also an opportunity to have a conversation. And so those frameworks allow them to happen much more meaningfully. So, we are very much focused on this idea that we provide community and local access for men to be able to develop and maintain social and support networks. So they've got somewhere to go, someone to talk to, something to do, and support when they need it. We are preventative and non-clinical, so of course we then need to inform and educate and train the guys in our communities to say, well, here's what you need to look out for, and here's what you do. Here's how you have those conversations, and here's how you can support them and where they can go. Community and connection is an important part of kind of managing your health and wellbeing. It's one of our, well, they're two of our core pillars. So, we are blokes. Let's just keep it really, really simple. All you need to do is turn up and we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah, no, great. And because it is blokes, it is Australians, you also use storytelling and humour. You couldn't do this without humour in Australians. We've got to laugh at ourselves. Even the darkest time, it helps. It breaks barriers. And I know that's something you definitely believe in too.
Yeah, I think storytelling is a great way for me to be able to share my own experience. It normalises conversations about mental health. It gives mental health a face and a voice. But the idea behind storytelling is that it can also take people on your journey, and it's a real skill, and it's something that's really hard. And it's for me, it's still developing. This idea of being able to share my story so it's informative and engaging. But humour is, you think about a bunch of blokes standing around having a conversation. And inevitably there is someone having a laugh, someone having a deep and meaningful, someone taking on a challenge, but there's always an undertone of banter. Yep. And if that's what gets blokes talking, then great, kind of whatever it takes. We used to have within, in particular our DY groups, a dedicated joke teller, who every meetup, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he had to turn up with a joke. And we relied upon this, it had to be new, it had to be different, people had to laugh. And it was a great icebreaker, it was a great way to bring guys together, and it was a great way to kind of reduce those barriers and hurdles, get people laughing. And we all know laughter produces some great chemicals in the body as well, so it helps with stress and anxiety, but it just breaks down those walls and makes people feel almost immediately comfortable.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And you've got some big plans for Mongrel Men, because as you said, it started, you said then in DY in your local area. So, where would you like to see? Because obviously anyone in Australia would like to be part of something like this, or for men, but it's not there yet, is it?
No, 3 years on, we are 12 locations across New South Wales and Queensland, supported by 15 volunteers. Our goal in the next 5 years is to have 800 locations across the country. And if we can do that with our regular meetups and our programs, we can impact 1 million men over those 5 years. But directionally, where we want to get to in the next 10 years is impacting 1 million men every year, which means we need 2,000 locations. So that's 2,000 volunteers running, a meetup once a week, getting guys out, moving, talking, connecting and sharing. Is it ambitious? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Yeah, if we want to make a real impact in the numbers and impact men's lives, then they're the kind of numbers that we need to look at. And that's most of the postcodes across Australia, to be fair. So we'd love to have someone in every community running events, activities and programs for blokes, so they've got those places to go, someone to talk to, and something to do with the support they need in their local community when they need it.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah. I will follow this with interest. I still, even though I've stopped playing soccer, the end of season trip is still going. And it's something very much to look forward to. And it just, as you said, the banter. And we do have someone in our team who's, you just know he's going to come up with a joke every time, and you look forward to it. Even now, it just makes me smile. So they're the sort of things I totally agree with, and just really wish you the best on this. Tim, I've kept you long enough, but it's just been really great to have you on the show. And that half an hour has just gone just so quickly. I do ask every guest that's been on the show, what's the best piece of advice they've heard? So I may not be straightening your tie, but it's what's the best piece of advice you've had, Tim?
Breathe. It's pretty important. But on a more serious note, I think, perspective of playing the long game. So it's very easy to get caught in the here and now, to think that what you're experiencing is not just now, but forever. And that might be, stress, anxiety, deadlines at work, anything. But things are constantly evolving and changing. Playing the long game.
Playing the long game. Love it. Yeah. No, thank you very much, Tim. It's been great having you on the show. All the best with Mongrels Men and your business betterment. We will have all the details in the information that goes with this podcast, as well as website details. But just Tim, again, all the best with this project. It's just terrific. It's something our society needs, and the more you can do, the better it's going to be for Australian men.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me on and opening up a conversation about mental health. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about Tim Hewson and Mongrels Men, visit mongrelsmen.com or feel free to email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit our website, themoneysandwich.com, if you have any questions or would like to learn more. Enjoyed this episode and want to hear more of A Bite from the Money Sandwich? Make sure you subscribe on your platform of choice so you can automatically receive each episode as soon as it's released. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation. And past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is to provide tips, coaching and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from the Money Sandwich.